recording has started. So shall we start? All things here are the one?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have read the para?
Yes.
Okay. If you have already read it, then I'll read each sentence and we'll see whether it's clear. Okay. The chapter is self-surrender in works. Whatever you are doing, self-surrender means you think of the divine and offer that work that you are doing to the divine. Whether it be eating or sleeping or playing football or treating a patient, okay, whatever it is, you just remember once, and what I am about to do is for you, O Lord or O Mother, okay. That's self-surrender works. So now I am reading the sentences. All things here are the one and indivisible, eternal, transcendent and cosmic Brahman that is in its seeming divided in things and creatures. In other words, all the multiplicity that you see in the physical world and even in the in the cosmos, okay, whatever you see is actually all the divine taking different forms. It is seeming to be different, okay, but actually it's all the divine only. Again, we come back to that famous example of the water, water vapor, ice, okay. It's all same essentially, but taking different forms. So whatever you see, they are all essentially the Brahman. It can be the transcendent Brahman, it can be the cosmic Brahman, and it can also be the physical objects. That also is all Brahman, sort of condensed into forms. So that's clear. And it is seeming. It is divided seemingly. It is not really divided. Okay. All right. Then after that, we go to the next one. In seeming only, Sri Aurobindo says, for in truth, it is always one and equal in all things and creatures, and the division is only a phenomenon of the surface. The phenomenon of the surface, we can give many examples. In troubled waters, the moon will appear to be many. Okay, so wherever there is movement, the one seems to become the many. So that's what he's saying. In the movement, the nature of the physical world is movement. Okay, the nature of the spirit is no movement at all, immutability, and this is mutability. So when there is movement, the each thing seems to be separate, like as I told you, the moon reflected in troubled waters. It's exactly that. It's a surface phenomenon. Division is only a phenomenon of the surface. The word phenomenon is any event in the physical world which is a starting point and an ending point. That's a phenomenon. Okay? You can apply that to anything. Okay? Everything has a starting point and an ending point. After that, it disappears. So that's a phenomenon. So it's only a phenomenon of the surface. As long as we live in the ignorant seeming, now we are adding another word, ignorant, because we are not seeing the reality. We are seeing only the multiplicity, which is ignorant. It's not the reality. As long as we live in the ignorant seeming, we are the ego and the subject, and are subject to the modes of nature. The modes of nature are sattva, rajas, tamas, corresponding to the matter, the life, and the mind. Okay, so matter is, the principle of matter is stability, no unwillingness to change. Okay, and that becomes the tamas, darkness and no movement, unwillingness. Also darkness means ignorance, okay, and no understanding of things. That is the tamas. But it's also got a very important function because it assures the stability of forms in the physical world. If that is not there, it will be very difficult to deal with things in the physical world. It goes on changing, you don't know to whom you are talking even. Okay, so tamas is very necessary, but it's at the lowest level. It ensures stability. Then rajas is the opposite of tamas. There is unwillingness to stay quiet in these rajas. In tamas, there is unwillingness to move, but here in rajas is exactly the opposite. It's full of energy and is unwilling to remain stable. Constantly wants movement and energy. and spending of energy. That's the rajas. And its characteristic in man and animal is desire. And what is that coming from? Ego. Ego, as I've told you, is if you want to define the ego, don't think of it as arrogance and sense of superiority. No, those are results of ego. The ego is the principle of it is that which makes you feel separate from others. That's the ego. Okay? Egoism. And when you feel yourself separate from others, you start judging, comparing, and then all this sense of superiority, arrogance, okay, haughtiness, pride, all these things come in. But that's not the ego, those are the effects of ego. So long as you are in the ego consciousness, you are sure to see only the seeming divisions. You are going to see the multiplicity. If you want to see another word, okay? You don't see the connectedness, you don't see the oneness of everything. Okay? Mentally, you can understand. Mentally, we can understand very well that all tables are different, but they are made of wood, which is a common thing. So there is wood is common to everything. All our bodies are made of matter, and that is the common thing. Okay, everybody of us has got whatever I have, you have. I have a liver, you have a liver. Everybody has a liver. We have a heart. We have so there is a huge amount of commonness, but that's only a mental understanding. That's not enough. You have to actually see the oneness. You see the oneness of things. That happens only when you have got rid of your ego. And ego means you are stuck in the body mind life. Your soul is prisoner of the body mind life, and it is subject to the body, mind, and life. Therefore, it is subject to sattva, rajas, tamas. Okay. So, then, when you are there, you are also subject to dualities. These dualities also we have discussed one day. Okay, and dualities means everything in the physical world, there is an equal and opposite thing which is equally valid in the physical world. Okay? If there is movement, there is stability, apparent stability. If there is love, there is hatred. If there is generosity, there is miserliness. Okay? If there is a calm, quiet, there is also a disturbance. These are all the dualities. So when these are all equal. When you are in an ego consciousness, you see the multiplicity, and the multiplicity means the dualities. So this is the, and the dualities is listed here. We'll go through that. Good and evil, sin and virtue, grief and joy, pain and pleasure, good fortune and ill fortune, success and failure. This has given a huge amount of duality so that you understand the principle. Success and failure. We follow helplessly the iron or guilt or iron round of the wheel of Maya. The Maya is the, the physical world. Okay, that's one of the meanings of Maya. At the lower level, Maya is the illusion. You see the unreality. You see only the division, which is unreal. So long as you are in the ego consciousness, you are ignorant, you see the multiplicity, and you don't see the reality. At best, we have only the poor relative freedom, which by us is ignorantly called free will. We feel that we are free. Actually, there is no freedom at all. It is body, mind, life that is controlling you. You are not controlling body, mind, life at all. You feel that you are controlling. Okay, I can do what I want with my body. I can do what I want, maybe a little less with my vital. Okay, but the mind is very difficult to control. But you feel that I am capable of thinking. Actually, you are not thinking. The thoughts are occurring in you because of nature. Nature is making you, nature is pushing thoughts into your mind. Nature is pushing emotions and vibrations and sensations from outside into you. And the body also is being subjected to impacts from the outside world, and you are also impacting with the outside world. Okay, so this is the constant interchange. And you are helplessly bound to this interchange. You can do nothing about it. Unless you have gone out of the body mind life. And that is when you go to the spiritual levels of consciousness. Your consciousness is out of the body mind life, and that is the end of the ego and the beginning of knowledge and the ending of ignorance. Only the beginning, not the full. Okay. But the freedom that you think you have, but that is at bottom illusory. Okay. It's not true. It is illusory. Since it is the modes of nature that express themselves through our personal will. The modes of nature are making you, modes of nature is holding all the strings. You are a puppet and it is moving you like a puppet. It is force of nature grasping us, ungrasped by us. We have no control over it. The nature is controlling us. That determines what we shall will and how we shall will it. Even all that is also done by nature only. Nature, not an independent ego, chooses what object we shall seek, whether by reasoned will or unreflecting impulse. Mostly the unreflecting impulse is in the animal world, and even some of the human beings also, sometimes your unreflecting impulse is there. But even if you are an intelligent person and you are very focused in your attention and your actions, whether by reasoned will, but that also nature is actually making you do that. Okay, so at any moment of our existence, if on the contrary we live in the unifying reality of the Brahman, then we go beyond the ego and overstep nature. Overstepping nature is your body, mind, life. So you are going out of it. You are overstepping means you have gone out of your body, mind, life, and then you are no more subject to sattva, rajas, tamas. You are no more subject to your body, mind, life. Then you are free. That is mukti. That's why it's called mukti. That's the second level, the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay? Nature, not that we read. If on the contrary, our computer said that we have to start from here, if on the contrary. Okay. If on the contrary, we live in the unifying reality of Brahman, then we go beyond the ego and overstep nature. For then we get back to our true self. The true self is not our body, mind, life, but it is the self and the psychic being. The psychic being is the representative of the self in the body, okay, like an ambassador, and the self is universal and vast and not limited. It is not individual. The self is not individual. The, uh, the, uh, the psychic being is individual, but the self is not individual. It can be experienced first as individual, but as soon as you realize yourself, you feel that, array, it's also the soul of everybody else. Okay, so that's the self. Then we get back to our true self and become the spirit. In the spirit, we are above the impulsion of nature, superior to her modes and forces. The modes are sattva, rajas, tamas, and they are all forces. Attaining to a perfect equality in the soul, mind and heart. Okay, he has not spoken about the body because the body is the most difficult. Okay, we realize our true self of oneness, one with all beings, one too with that which expresses itself in them and in all that we see and experience. So you not only feel yourself one with everybody else, but also that which is there hiding behind in everybody. That also you start seeing the divinity in everybody. This equality and this oneness are the indispensable twin foundations you must lay down for a divine being, a divine consciousness, a divine action. Okay. So this is the equality and oneness. Okay. We have discussed this also because right in the beginning, one para, previous para, he says that equality and oneness are the key principles of as the Gita says. So equality and oneness, we have discussed that. The oneness is you see the connectedness of everybody and you see that there is really no difference. All the multiplicity is in only an image, and the divine presence is there everywhere. That's the oneness. And equality means you are not subject to the dualities. If there is success, you feel happy. If there is failure, you feel unhappy. If there is pain, you feel unhappy. If there is pleasure, you feel happy. But no, when you are in the self, neither happy nor unhappy. But there's a calm, quiet happiness. But the happiness is not a strong emotion. It's a very vast calmness. Okay? That's what you feel. That's what Shelby is saying. That one with so equality and oneness are the indispensable twin foundation we must lay down for a divine being, a divine consciousness, a divine action. Okay, this equality, I think we have discussed also one day. This equality does not mean to say that my behavior towards everybody will be the same, but my reactions, okay, I will take everything in a calm spirit and I will see the differences. Equality does not mean red, blue, violet, green are all the same to me. Certainly not. I see green as green, I see violet as violet, I see blue as blue. When I see someone cruel, I see it, but I am not affected by it. I don't become judgmental. That is what is meant by equality. Okay? I see someone calm and quiet, I see someone agitated, I make the difference. I can see the difference. But I am not I am not subject to that, the emotions that it generates normally. Okay? So that is what is meant by equality. I gave you an interesting example, and I repeat that a mother has 5 children. Okay, one child is dumb, one child is lame, one child is blind, and the other two are normal. Her attention to all, she will love all equally because she is the mother. That's equality. But that doesn't mean to say that her behavior and dealing with the others are all the same. How can it be? Because she will be more careful about the blind boy, he needs more attention. She will be more careful about the lame boy. But the other two, she need not pay that much attention. This is very interesting because in the Gita also, in one time, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that the self is equal to all. Samam Brahma, Samam. At the same time, in another place, he tells Sri Krishna, you are dear to me. Okay, so that's why this is the difference. Dear to me doesn't mean to say that you are specially dear to me. Okay, so this is you have to understand that equality and oneness. Then, not one with all. There is a little difference of text here. I have not one with all. We are spiritually not divine. This is what I have. You may have some other text. Okay, so not equal soul to all things, happenings and creatures, we cannot see spiritually. We cannot know divinely, cannot feel divinely towards others. Feeling divinely means equality and oneness. The supreme power, the one eternal and infinite, is equal to all things and to all beings. And because it is equal, it can act with an absolute wisdom according to the truth of its works and its force, and according to the truth of each thing and of every creature. Now, note that the truth of each thing differs. So, your dealing with them also will differ according to the truth of each thing. That's exactly what we discussed just now. Okay? The truth of each thing is different in everybody, and so your attention to them and your dealing with them will be different. But inwardly, it's all the same. You are all the same, and of every creature. Right. So we go to the next. I think we have read this once. Anyway, we can now read the next one. Okay. So this is also the only true freedom possible to man. One of you has to read. It is 5:08, so we have plenty of time. We read the paragraph. Who will read today? Any one of you?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, yes, Archana ji, do that.
This is also the only true freedom possible to man,
Yeah.
a freedom which he cannot have. Can you hear clearly?
Oh yes, very, very clearly, loud and clear.
This is also the only true freedom possible to man, a freedom which he cannot have unless he outgrows his mental separativeness and becomes the conscious soul in nature. The only free will in the world is the one divine will of which nature is the executrix, for she is the master and creator of all other wills. Human free will can be real in a sense, but like all things that belong to the modes of nature, it is only relatively real. The mind rides on a swirl of natural forces. balances on a poise between several possibilities, inclines to one side or another, settles, and has the sense of choosing, but it does not see. It is not even dimly aware of the that force behind that has determined its choice. It cannot see it because that force is something total and to our eyes indeterminate. Mind can only distinguish with an approach to clarity and precision some out of the complex variety of particular determinations by which this force works out her incalculable purposes. Partial itself, the mind rides on a part of the machine, unaware of nine-tenths of its motor agencies in time and environment, unaware of its past preparation and future drift. But because it rides, it thinks that it is directing the machine. In a sense, it counts for that. In a sense, it counts for that clear inclination of the mind, which we call our will, that firm settling of the inclination which presents itself to us as a deliberate choice, is one of nature's most powerful determinants. But it is never independent and sole. Behind this petty instrumental action of the human will, there is something vast and powerful and eternal that oversees the trend of the inclination and presses on the turn of the will. There is a total truth in nature greater than our individual choice. And in this total truth, or even beyond and behind it, there is something that determines all results. Its presence and secret knowledge keep up steadily in the process of nature a dynamic, almost automatic perception of the right relations, the varying or persistent necessities, the inevitable steps of the movement. There is a secret divine will, eternal and infinite, omniscient and omnipotent, that expresses itself in the universality and in each particular of all these apparently temporal and finite, inconscient or half conscient things. This is the power of presence meant by the Gita when it speaks of the Lord within the heart of all existences, who turns all creatures as if mounted on a machine by the illusion of nature.
This is the last, he is quoting the Gita, and it is the 18th chapter, verse 61. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddeshe arjuna tishtati. Brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. So, the Lord is inside and he is operating the machine of the body, mind, life. That's what it means. Okay, so very clearly Surendra has told you that although your sense of freedom is not a reality, yet it's a very powerful determinant in the field of nature. Nature is your prisoner, but while you are in the prison, you still feel that there is a possibility that you are acting. You are not acting actually, but you are acting, because if that were not there, and if everything were determined from before, you would make no effort to progress. Okay? So that is a very powerful. This is the word nature's most powerful determinants. So very clear what he's saying. Your free will, what you think is free will, is not true. Yet it has to be acknowledged as a very powerful method of progress. If that is not there, there will be no will to progress also. Okay. So we go through each sentence. With this background is quite simple, what we have discussed. So we'll just quickly go through each sentence. This is also the only true freedom possible to man. And what is this freedom? When your soul goes out of body, mind, life and reaches the spiritual planes of consciousness, the second level, you are free. And that's a real freedom. Now, but it's a relative freedom, because even that is a relative freedom, because you can't do whatever you want with your body, mind, life. But you are free. The soul is free. A freedom which he cannot have unless he outgrows his mental separativeness. The mental separativeness is very clearly the seeing of the many, okay? The seeing of the multiplicity, and becomes the conscious soul in nature. So you have to become the conscious soul in nature. Okay? You then only it's possible for you to have real freedom. The only free will in the world is the divine will, of which nature is the executrix. The divine is the only one that has a full freedom. But as we have discussed many times, when the divine manifests himself, there is a limitation of everything. Limitation of consciousness, limitation of force, and limitation also of freedom. So it starts becoming less and less free, more and more bound, until finally in the physical world, everything is bound by laws. Okay? The earth is going around the sun, very fixed manner. That's a law that operates. Even a comet that goes around the sun, every 75 years it may come back, but its orbit is fixed. There is no change at all. Everything will behave according to laws. That's what he's saying. Okay, so human will can be real in a sense. Note the word in a sense. Because, but like all things that belong to the modes of nature, it is only relatively real. Even at the overmind level, the freedom is already restricted. And as it keeps coming down more and more, the freedom gets more and more restricted, and your ignorance goes on increasing. Until finally, at our level, our ignorance is almost total and our freedom is almost nil. But we don't realize that. The mind rides on a swirl of natural forces. Right? All the thoughts that occur, okay, all the forces, the emotions that are there, all they enter into you, and you are also exporting your own thoughts and your emotions. You are exporting. There is constant interchange between the universe and you. Balances and a poise between several possibilities, inclines to one side or another. When you are thinking of a decision, that's exactly what Swami is describing. You think that you have decided something. Oh, I had 2, 3 choices, but I have decided this by my own free will. No, even that choice is determined only by nature. That's what he's telling you. Okay? Balances and a poise between several possibilities, inclines to one side or another, settles and has the sense of choosing. But it does not see, it is not even dimly aware of the force behind that has determined its choice. We don't even know who is controlling us. Just like the puppet does not know that it is being controlled by the one who is holding the strings. Okay? So it cannot see it because that force is something total and to our eyes indeterminate. Indeterminate, without features, without, you can't recognize it. At most, mind can only distinguish with an approach to clarity and precision some of the complex variety of particular determinations by which this force works out her incalculable purposes. That is exactly what science also is. What he is describing applies to science and also to our own individual decision-making process. Some things we see and we feel that we have seen everything. Okay? But the more you advance in knowledge, the more you feel that there are more and more determinants. A good example of this is the weather. Okay, in the beginning we did not even know that tomorrow or day after tomorrow a storm is going to hit Pondicherry or a tsunami is coming. Okay, but now with the increase of knowledge we know that the temperature of the sea is important, the pressure of the wind is important, the how it is going. There are so many other factors. Okay, there is the inclination of the earth that is there. So now we know that meteorology has got 14 determinants. Maybe tomorrow there will be even more. But your knowledge increases more and more. But in the beginning, it is only some, not all. Okay. So, but when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, you see 10 times more than you are seeing now. That's why your decision is more likely to be correct. Okay. So that's what it is. At most, mind can only distinguish with an approach to clarity and precision some of the complex variety of particular determination, particular events and particular forces by which this force works out her incalculable purposes. Incalculable to us, not very, very calculable to herself. Partial itself, the mind rides on a part of the machine, unaware of 9/10 of its motor agencies in time and environment. So, not only in time but also environment. So, instead of saying time and space, He's saying time and environment. He's very descriptive. Unaware of its past preparation and future drift. This is very interesting because what he's talking about is the law of causality and karma. What you have done in the past affects your present. Okay? The law of karma operates not only in the human beings but to everything in the physical world. Even the past history of a nation, okay, that also there is a law of karma. Don't think that the law of karma does not apply to nations. Okay, it's very interesting. I just give you one example and you think about it. The European powers, okay, they terrorized the whole world and colonized the whole world and made them suffer. Okay, now this suffering will come back on them. Okay, you are seeing that there is a mixture and all of these refugees are going in and they don't know how to deal with them. Also the terrorism that is there. So there is always a karmic recoil at everywhere. What your past, past determines the present. Yes, tell me.
In the inanimate things also the karma works.
Speak a little slowly. Repeat
In
the question.
like the stone or the animals, does the karma work?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because what is karma? Law of causality. Okay. In the physical world, why only animals? Even the physical world, the laws of physics is nothing but karma. Okay. The future, the past determines your present. And the present action will determine your future action. That's a law of causality. It does operate, yes. Only when you are out of the body-mind life, the law of causality does not apply to the soul, but it continues to apply to the body. Okay? Yeah. So that is the law of causality. It thinks it is directed in machine. So unaware of its past preparation and future drift. The words past preparation and future drift is very clearly is talking of the law of karma. Okay, we call it the law of karma. In the West, they call it the law of causality. Okay, the chain that is very rigidly fixed in the physical world. But because it rides, it thinks that it is directing the machine. We feel that we are in charge, but we are not in charge at all. In a sense, it counts for that clear inclination of the mind which we call our will, that firm settling of the inclination which presents itself to us as a deliberate choice, is one of nature's most powerful determinants. Why? Because if that were not there, there would be no progress and there would be no will to action. But the will to action comes because you feel you are in charge. You know what you're doing. But it is never independent in soul. Many other things come in to influence your decision, but you're not aware of it. Behind this petty instrumental action of the human will, there is something vast and powerful and eternal that oversees the trend of the inclination and presses on the turn of the will. In other words, each individual's will is being influenced solidly by the universal will. The cosmos also has a will, and the divine will translates first in the cosmic will, and the cosmic will again seems to operate in each particular multiplicity, each unit of multiplicity, each human being, each animal, everything. Okay? There is a total truth in nature greater than our individual choice. I remember, I just tell you one particular thing. It's interesting, but it may sound very not so important, but it's interesting. There used to be a cat, okay? And I used to see that when you tickle it in the leg, okay? Tickle it, its physical reaction is always the same. It starts moving the leg in a particular way. So I used to really enjoy that I can make him do that action with his leg by tickling him in one particular place. And it's invariable. The moment you do it, the same action will take place. That's the amount of freedom that the cat doesn't have. Okay, there's no freedom. He's completely bound by the same thing applies to us. Okay, but we don't see it. That's what Srimad is saying. Yet it has got a, a, a utility in nature, because that makes you feel that you are in charge, and that makes you progress towards a greater consciousness. There is a total truth in nature greater than our individual choice. And in this total truth, and even beyond and behind it, there is something that determines all results. Okay? Beyond is higher and behind is inward. Beyond is the vertical up and behind is the horizontal in. Okay? Its presence and secret knowledge keep up steadily in the process of nature a dynamic, almost automatic perception of the right relations, the varying or persistent necessities, the inevitable steps of the movement. In other words, the divine is completely controlling everything in the physical world, but you don't see the control. You feel that there is no control. You see, oh, wars are taking place, people are fighting, okay? There is chaos everywhere. But all this is intended. And you don't see that because you don't see the totality. But everything has got a place and a purpose. That's what Sridhar is saying here very, very clearly. Okay? Secret knowledge keep up steadily in the process of nature. A dynamic, almost automatic perception of the right relations. Who is having the automatic perception? The nature herself. The varying or persistent necessities, the inevitable steps of the movement. There is a secret divine will, eternal and infinite, omniscient and omnipotent, that expresses itself in the universality, in the cosmos. Okay? The secret divine will is at the highest level, and it is expressing itself in the universality through laws, okay? Through purpose and very clear causality. And in each particular of all these apparently temporal and finite, inconscient and half conscient things. Even whether it's conscient or half conscient, the divine is completely in charge of everything and governing everything. You don't see that, but that is what Shiva is saying. This is the power or presence meant by the Gita when it speaks of the Lord within the heart of all existences, who turns all creatures as if mounted on a machine by the illusion of nature. As I told you, those of you who know the Sanskrit, the Gita's 18th chapter, verse 61. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrid Tishtati. Okay. So he is there in the secret heart of all creatures. Who? Ishvara, the Lord. Brahmayan, making them go round and round. Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani, all the Bhutanis are the creatures. Yantra Rudhani, as though they are mounted on a machine. And he is turning the machine. How? By the power of his Maya, by the movement. That's what it is. So we have 10 minutes. We can finish the next paragraph today.
Would you like me to read?
Please do that. This divine, yeah.
This divine will is not an alien power or presence. It is intimate to us, and we ourselves are part of it. For it is our own highest self that possesses and supports it. Only, it is not our conscious mental will. It rejects often enough what our conscious will accepts and accepts what our conscious will rejects. For while this secret one knows all and every whole and each detail, our surface mind knows only a little part of things. Our will is conscious in the mind, and what it knows by the thought only. The divine will is superconscious to us because it is in its essence supramental, and it knows all because it is all. Our highest self, which possesses and supports this universal power, is not our ego self, not our personal nature. It is something transcendent and universal, of which these smaller things are only foam and flowing surface. If we surrender our conscious will and allow it to be made one with the will of the eternal. Then, and then only shall we attain to a true freedom, living in the divine liberty. We shall no longer cling to this shackled so-called freedom, free will, a puppet freedom, ignorant, illusory, relative, bound to the error of its own inadequate vital motives and mental figures.
So a relatively small para and very interesting. But the summary of the para, you can put it in this way. When you think that you are really free, you are a slave to nature. And when you become a slave to the divine, then you are really free. It's an interesting way of putting it, but that's exactly the thing. Because the only freedom that is available is to the Brahman, to the divine. He is the only one that decides everything freely. And if you surrender to him and identify yourself with him, okay, then he is acting through you. But now the you and the him are the same. So you feel that you are acting because identity becomes possible. You become the divine. It sounds very funny, but that is exactly because the divine is deciding, you are deciding through the divine. Okay, that's the only freedom possible when you are a slave to the divine. When you surrender to the divine, it's a oxymoronic situation, but that's exactly the truth. Okay, I find it very interesting. You can put it that way. That so long as you think you are free, you are not. You are really a slave. Slave to whom? To nature. And when you surrender to the divine fully, that also has got gradations. Okay, not it doesn't come immediately because surrender to the divine means what? At the highest level, then there is total freedom. Otherwise, there is a limited freedom. Okay, so quickly we'll go through. We have 6 minutes. This divine will is not an alien power of presence. This is a very important statement. You are yourself. In you, the divine is there. So it's not something that you have to get from outside. It is something that you have to discover within yourself. That's what he's saying. It's an important statement. We may think of it as very bland, okay? This will is not an alien will. This will is not an alien power of presence, but it is part of you. So it's not that difficult to get. It is difficult, but not impossible. It is intimate to us, and we ourselves are part of it. We are part of it, remember, okay? Because the divine will is infinite, and you are a part of the divine will. So you are only a part of it. But that part is enough to, if you identify it, then you become free. For it is our highest self that possesses and supports it. Only it is not our conscious mental will. It's not your will, but the divine will. Okay? The will of the self and the will of the psychic being, not your mental will. It rejects often what our conscious will accepts and accepts what our conscious will rejects. The real divine will not always act in complete harmony and conformity with your own will. Okay, you may want to do something, but the divine has got other plans for you. Okay, a very prominent and a wonderful example is Srivdo wanted freedom for India and he was fighting for India's freedom. The divine said, no, you go elsewhere, go to Pondicherry and do my other more important work. Do the supermental work. Okay, this freedom movement will be taken care of by others. I have something more important for you. Okay, so this is it. So, and sometimes what you feel is right, the divine will reject. And what you feel is wrong, the divine will insist and you can do that. Okay, so that's the interesting part. I gave you another example also once. Okay, Kameshwar, he was in charge of the servants. Okay, and one day he was invited by a Frenchman. Okay, and the Frenchman offered him lunch, dinner, and in the dinner he offered him liquor. And naturally he didn't drink the liquor. He said, no, I don't drink. So when he came to mother, he thought it's a very wonderful thing. I will tell mother how I resisted the temptation to drink. And he told mother, he offered me wine, but I did not drink it, expecting to be praised. So, but the divine is rejecting what he thinks is the right thing to do. Okay, and the mother told him, "What? You refused a Frenchman his offer of a little bit of a liquor to you? You should not have done that." In other words, again we come back to that famous example of it's the attitude inside which matters, not the outer action. The outer action is not as important. It is important, but not as important as the inner attitude. Okay, so let's see one other thing. For while the secret one knows all and every hole and each detail, our surface mind knows only a little part of things. Our will is conscious in the mind, and what it knows by the thought only, not by the spiritual knowledge, but thought. The divine will is super conscious to us because it is in its essence supramental. The word supramental here is very clearly supramental, above the mind, okay? Not the usual supramental. You can see the context. And it knows all because it is all. Our highest self, which possesses and supports this universal power, is not our ego self. The ego is the one that binds you down at the lowest level. Not our personal nature. Personal nature, body, mind, life. It is something transcendent and universal, of which the smaller things are only foam and flowing surface. The smaller things are all the forms in the physical world, your own body, your own vital, your own mind. All these are all very, very small things because they are not vast and universal, are only foam and flowing surface. If we surrender our conscious will and allow it to be made one with the will of the eternal, then and then only shall we attain to a true freedom. As I told you, your true freedom lies in becoming a slave to the divine. I'm putting it in a very dramatic manner, but when you identify your will with the divine will, okay, that's a more sober way of putting it, okay, then you become free. Because the divine is the only freedom and is giving you his freedom. But so long as you think that you have a will, the divine can't give you because you are resisting his will. Yes? Only then shall we attain to a true freedom. Living in the divine liberty, we shall no longer cling to this shackled so-called free will. A puppet freedom, ignorant, illusory, relative, bound to the error of its own inadequate vital motives and mental figures. There you are. So, we stop here today. Next time, we can do a distinction has to be firmly seized. So, I don't put the page number, I just say a distinction.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Au revoir, everybody.
Au revoir.